I was born ready, as my mama said.
Okay, so today we're going to be talking about vampires, John Carpenter's Vampires, 1998. Episode 2 of Investigating Film for Dummies. I'm the dummy, he's the master.
The semi-authority on some topics.
Yes.
Anyway.
So
what bothered you most about the film, The Vampires?
Well, I started watching it and I thought, why did he have me watch this film? I hate it. I hated every
frame.
Pretty much, I hated every frame.
Was it the misogynistic, the treatment of women that mostly found disturbing?
I thought it was actually funny. I wonder, I'm fairly certain that movie would not be made today.
You would probably be right on. It was almost not made to begin with. It was actually slated to be a $60 million production. That was, that they went around asking huge stars, like even Clint Eastwood to play the part.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, he turned it down smartly. And John Carpenter wasn't even associated with the film at all.
Mm-hmm.
So it was based on some novel, big production company, it was going to be huge, and then for some reason it just wasn't happening. So
let me ask this question.
Okay.
Who is John Carpenter?
John Carpenter is an extremely influential filmmaker in Hollywood. He made the original Halloween.
Oh.
He made The Thing. He made The Fog. He made Escape to New York and Escape to L.A. Mm-hmm. All cult classics. Mm-hmm. So this was, to me, a John Carpenter misfire.
Yes.
It's like, to him, he wanted to do, he's always been kind of a Raoul Walsh fan, who was an old-time Western director. And this was his chance to do a Western. In this case, he wanted to do a kind of a spaghetti Western, which is, spaghetti Western is always much more violent, sexy, have more sex, more violence, and more, just a more grittier feel for the West than the regular Western, American Western had. Mm-hmm. So this was kind of fulfilled all those things for John Carpenter. I mean, he had the sex, mm-hmm. he had the violence, and he had I don't think the humor was that well done.
Was he trying to be funny?
Of course he was trying to be funny. That's the humor of it's one thing about the spaghetti Western, there's a certain amount of humor in it. Plus, Dusk to Dawn had been done the year before, which is a bit of a classic. Lost Boys in the 80s, right? Used humor very well. Yeah. And I think John Carpenter was they cut it from a $60 million budget to $20 million. Mm-hmm. Way down, and he took charge and he rewrote the script, and then supposedly with James Woods, the only way James Woods would do it, because that's about the only actor they could get to do it, mm-hmm. only star they could find, it was he would improvise the first. I mean, he would do the first scene like the script said, and then the second scene he would get to improvise, mm-hmm. and you can see that in the. Yeah. What gets me about Carpenter, even in his early movies, was that he is every movie he's ever done, even his classics, he seems to have the enthusiasm of a student filmmaker. And in this one, no more. I mean, it looked like it was made by a student filmmaker.
Yeah. I mean,
it was just not one of his better movies. Which is the funny part, is that Gene Siskel, who of Siskel and Ebert gave it like 2 stars. Gene Siskel gave it 4 stars. He thought it was the best movie of the year. I'm not kidding. He thought James Woods should get Best Actor of the Year. He thought the cinematography equaled the best of Warner Brothers cartoons. And then next year he died. So Siskel died in 1999, and this movie came out in 98. So I don't know what he died from. Maybe a brain tumor. I shouldn't laugh. That's a terrible thing to think. But yeah. And then one critic, a female critic, said, what, does John Carpenter hate women?
Right.
But you know who he used as the lead character? You know who that is? Cheryl Lee, right? Mm-mm. Cheryl Lee is Laura Palmer from Twin Peaks, who was murdered, and he uses her as the lead character, as the vampire, telepathic vampire character.
Oh, wow, okay.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, but they were mean to each other. He was mean to the men, too. I mean, he would slap them across the face to the ground.
It was a nasty character, and James Woods. I always thought of just him as a person is that way.
Is he?
He's a devout Roman Catholic, and now a Trump supporter.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if he still supports Trump, but he had for many years. He tweeted about, I don't know, some of these, you can look him up online, some of the nasty tweets of James Woods are evidently famous.
Mm-hmm.
So he's not a completely pleasant character, but he hasn't been outed or he hasn't been counseled, I don't think, to any certain extent. I think he was accused of something and he got out of it. Some girl accused him of something. But that's been the last 10 years or so with the Me Too movement. But other than that, yeah, this film coming out at this time would be like grounds for protest.
Yeah.
So if you like those kind of movies, this movie is definitely for you. And it's surprising that Netflix has it on their streaming service.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I thought it was just intriguing to look back at the way movies were made and the way things that were allowed.
Well, he did escape to LA, I think, maybe the year before that. He had a series of movies in the 90s. None of them were very successful, but like they were in the 80s. But I think the last movie he made was in 2014, The War, and that wasn't very popular.
Mm-hmm.
He's just kind of gotten out of the movie making business. But
well,
he's around still.
John Carpenter.
You see him interviewed and stuff, and maybe in producing or helping people produce things. But in general, he's not making movies anymore. But why? Yeah, Escape to LA, which was I thought was a great satire.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, making fun of Los Angeles, of the culture and everything, LA culture.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good movie. I liked LA. I liked Escape to New York better, but I thought Escape to LA was a good movie. But it wasn't. I don't remember having all this. This was like his attempt at a spaghetti western.
Mm-hmm. And what are spaghetti westerns again? I think you told me.
Spaghetti westerns are movies that were made in Europe with usually Italian directors, hence the name spaghetti western. And they usually starred American movie stars, usually. And they were a huge source. There were lots of. I mean, I can't even believe how many spaghetti westerns there are. You can have an entire channel just devoted to spaghetti westerns, made in the '60s and early '70s. And in the movie Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, spends a lot of time reviewing Italian westerns.
Mm-hmm.
Or spaghetti westerns rather, because the main actor goes off to star in spaghetti westerns. And the novel, spends a lot of time dealing with spaghetti westerns because I read the novel Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which was very good. But we're getting off of the vampires story.
Mm-hmm.
But the spaghetti western is a big part of that movie.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was his inspiration, him and the early Raoul Walsh stories. But he made the original Assault on Precinct 13, which came out before Halloween, which is considered a classic of its kind, about guys who are policemen are locked in a police during a riot or something. I can't remember the exact storyline, but they're stuck in a police house and they have to defend it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like an old throwback to like John Wayne movies, Rio Bravo, that kind of thing. So this was his attempt to kind of cover that material again, except maybe with a spaghetti western twist. Was it successful? I didn't think it was that successful to me. This has probably been the third time I've seen it, and each time I've been very, very disappointed.
It doesn't get any better.
It doesn't get any better.
No.
And his casting was strange. They wanted Alec Baldwin actually to play his brother's part,
Mm-hmm.
Daniel Baldwin. But Alec Baldwin at the very last minute bowed out, probably because that was a smart move.
Yeah.
And for some, who knows? And so he suggested Daniel Baldwin take his part.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're in a half like a drunken mood and he does look a little like Alec Baldwin.
Yeah, in drunken mood for sure.
Right. So he's like.
Well, and the storyline with him and the girl, I mean, that made no sense. Like.
Oh, with the telepathy.
No.
Oh, the love story. How
first of all, he smacks her across the face on the bed and like treats her horribly, and then suddenly he's in love with her.
But he's also becoming a vampire himself.
Still.
So
It still, to me, made no sense.
He says they're made for each other, both vampires. One's a hooker and he's a. Well, I'm not sure what he was.
No,
You know, and it's kind of like a lot of these directors, even James Cameron, they enjoy making movies with a blue collar, kind of from a blue collar perspective.
Mm-hmm.
You know, these guys are like, they're like wranglers, they're like cowboys, but except they're wrangling vampires instead of cows.
Yeah, that
Right.
does make sense.
You know, and they're like, I mean, it had a lot of good themes in it for me, and I thought the first scene was the best one, where you think, you know, they're having a party and they're having a good time, and then the guy shows up and kills everybody.
Yeah.
You think, oh,
Slaughters them. Yeah.
it's like, oh, what happened to his crew? His whole crew's gone already, right? So I thought that was well done, but after that, it kind of slides into like one bloodbath after another.
Yeah.
And you know, and the Maximilian Schell character, the bishop, or whatever that Catholic bishop was, I thought that was pretty lame.
It was very lame, and then his reaction in that scene when he tells him that I don't know, Monsignor was murdered.
Oh, the Monsignor, thank you.
I'm not sure who was murdered, but what is his name? The main character's name?
Oh, Jack Crow.
Was that the character's name?
The main James Wood character?
Yeah, yeah.
His name is
James Woods,
Jack
yeah.
Crow. I was
just so he would react. What?
Yes.
I don't know. It was just very cheesy.
And Gene Siskel, best actor of the year. That's what blew my mind. He
I
said
mean, I just literally did what he did in the movie.
right.
I mean,
When I was reading about Gene Siskel, my jaw was just dropping, because usually, because I watched a lot of those Siskel and Ebert reviews back in the late '70s and early '80s, and Ebert was always the one who was kind of into the fantasy, science fiction stuff,
mm-hmm.
and Siskel didn't particularly care for them. And then this is kind of a reverse.
yeah.
Ebert didn't like it, because Ebert still had his brains about him, I think his wits about him.
Maybe he went to dinner and felt bad and wanted to throw him a bone. Went to dinner with John Carpenter.
Well, maybe. I don't think Carpenter really cared one way or the other. It was just another movie for him to make, and you know, and I think he was winding down by that time. He was already considered a cult figure.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he was such a big influence. And now each of his, only the Halloween, Escape to New York, and I think there was one other movie that was a big hit, but the rest of them weren't that big of hits.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's just built his. Even The Thing wasn't that big of a hit. It's become quite the cult.
And then I
classic,
saw that movie because you recommended it.
Yeah.
And that's a great movie.
That's a great movie. Oh, and that was another thing. They wanted Kurt Russell to play that part also, but he wisely turned it down too.
But he might have made it good.
He might have made it good.
I mean,
James Woods, I find in certain parts, you know, he always plays these irritating, hyped up,
yeah,
over the top characters that look like they're just stoned on cocaine all the time, right? And you know, it just I find it almost enervating.
movies with dummies. I don't know many.
Oh, you don't know
I
James
haven't watched
Woods that
enough
well.
movies to like.
Well,
comment.
James Woods, he did one great movie called Salvador in the '80s, where he plays a photographer in El Salvador. That, with Oliver Stone, directed that one, and that was a great film.
Mm-hmm.
So he's made some good movies. It's just that it was the stars with. I'm gonna talk about this the horoscope of stars,
Yeah.
the astrology of stars. They just did not meet correctly in this movie.
Yeah.
Just for me. Now there might be some people who love this film. I think Rotten Tomatoes gave it 43%.
Mm-hmm.
Did they give it that much?
Oh, I don't know. I just
Oh,
don't know.
I cannot. Well, I'm pretty sure it's that high, which I found a little bit shocking myself. Being.
I mean, it's a vampire movie, so maybe people's standards are lower.
Yeah, you know, and you know the location. I like the New Mexico location.
Mm-hmm.
So.
But I will say it didn't hold my interest too much.
Right.
I mean, and I guess we'll conclude soon. I guess what did hold my interest was the abuse of the women. I thought that was comical. I mean,
Oh, you thought it was comical?
I did, just because that would not happen now.
Oh, I see. Because of the time period
Yeah,
of
because of the time
the
period
90s.
difference. Yeah,
Um,
it's not comical, but comical that
Yeah.
times have changed.
I don't know. Maybe it was 43%, but I can't find it. There were a lot of people, critics who liked this movie though.
Mm-hmm.
They liked the gore.
They liked it.
They did like the gore,
Yeah.
which is quite
Comical.
was comical gore,
It was comical.
cartoonish gore.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, so it was probably one of the definitely at the low for me. I don't know how many. I think I've seen most of John Carpenter's movies. It's down near the bottom,
Mm-hmm.
but that's just me. Some people might love it because of the characters and the gore
Mm-hmm.
and the abuse of women.
And the abuse of women. It was just always just so unnecessary. It's just like backhander across under the ground. But again, he did it. James Wood did it to his brother at the end too. He slapped him across the face when he found out he was a vampire.
Right.
So he just did
Right.
it.
And maybe it's because I was actually watching a Raoul Walsh movie, The Red River, which is a classic Raoul Walsh movie, and they do a lot of face slapping in that movie too.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it's just a reaction. John Carpenter's just playing homage to the face slapping of Raoul Walsh movies. I don't know.
And who is that?
He's a famous director, directed many classic westerns back in the 40s, I think into the 50s.
Oh, and he did a lot.
A lot of face slapping.
A lot of face slapping.
In Red River, there's some face slapping going on.
Men and women, or just?
Oh, the most famous scene is when the kid comes in with after the Indian attack, and John, and he's kind of like crazy, and he's saying Indians everywhere. It's horrible, and he's just kind of a little bit off. So John Wayne walks up to him and slaps him in the face, and the kid pulls a gun on him and says, "I wouldn't do that if I were you." It's like, to me, I could watch the scene over and over again.
Good scene.
It's a good scene. So, yeah, Red River is a great film. Much better than Vampires.
Maybe that's what we'll watch next.
It's sad that poor John Carpenter got his chance to, revisit the Western theme and did such a terrible job at it. But again, there's always an audience for that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what Netflix is, how many people watch it on Netflix. So
Yeah.
what am I to say?
Anything else you'd like to add about
No.
this film, Vampires,
That is-
1998?
John Carpenter's Vampires, 1998.
5 years after I graduated from high school. So.
All right. So I remember watching it when it first came out, and I might have liked it back then. I don't know.
Yeah.
Our taste changed.
Although, when you mentioned Lost Boys and what was the other one?
Dusk Till Dawn.
Yeah, I mean, you can't compare those.
And
two.
again, it was almost like a reaction to Dusk Till Dawn, which came out the year before.
Yeah.
And so it's that's a popular vampire movie. Let's make another vampire movie.
Yeah.
I think there were a lot of vampire movies that came out in the late '90s,
Mm-hmm.
if I remember correctly, or into the millennium, or into the 2001, 2002. So Blade was
Yeah.
around that era.
And that did well, the first one, anyways.
Yeah. So it's just Carpenter's attempt to. I think maybe that's the trouble. He was trying to bite off more than he could chew.
Mm-hmm.
He's trying to do the Western, trying to do the vampires, and I don't even know the novel it even is a Western, like Carpenter made it into.
Yeah.
So anyway,
So, thumbs down for me.
and me, a word of caution when you watch it. It is what it is. It's the Carpenter's homage to spaghetti westerns, horror, and sex and gore.
All right.
All right.
Until next time.